I specifically said that we don't supply coal to Eskom. So, but we are trying to supply coal to Eskom. We put all of our projects to Eskom's attention, and they're evaluating them. I think, see, the thing is, like, if you look at Xavier's presentation, there's no lobby for coal. That's our issue at the moment. Okay, so Eskom needs Eskom is producing like 75 to 80% of energy from coal, but the largest coal producing company in this country, they're not here. Or I didn't see them if they're here. And I think the CEO is half greeny. So they're talking about like security of water supply, security of food supply, and they're supplying coal to Eskom, 36 million ton a year. So there's some like issues there. And the chamber, which is supposed to talk about coal, they're talking about the battery minerals, they're talking about everything except coal. They don't talk anything about coal. Okay, so now Eskom is left alone. Eskom needs to provide power to all the country. Everybody needs power, but nobody is supporting Eskom regarding like how they should get the coal. It's easy to blame Eskom with the corrupt practices and this and that, but the reality is coal mining companies should get things together and then support Eskom with the right quality coal. That's important, okay? And then secondly, with the right price of coal. So selling coal to Eskom at a high price is not a great thing. If a mining company's owner is very happy to supply coal to Eskom at a very high price, he should think twice. Because we've got a duty to supply coal to Eskom at the right price. And that should not be an exorbitant price. Okay. And again, I said earlier, it should be at the right quality. So we should not leave Eskom alone as a country. Because all these things like mentioned earlier by Xavier about renewables is great. Yeah, we all want solar, we all want wind, we all want all sorts of renewable energy, and we support it. It's complementary. But let's think about it. What is the base load in South Africa? And how are we going to produce the base load? No, the people don't talk about it. The people are saying like, okay, we need renewables and we need to transform this industry into a renewable energy supplying company, Eskom. No, it's impossible. You need base load. And I gave this example in Junior Indaba, and I'm going to give it again because I think it's very important. Can anybody say to Saudi Arabia to stop extracting oil? No. I mean, that's their bread and butter. Why do we talk about like stopping coal mining in this country? Who's gonna produce the base load? With what? We don't have gas. We don't have enough nuclear. We don't have oil. So our cheapest source of power is coal. We have to carry on mining coal, and according to Fossil Fuel Foundation, coal actually provides 700,000 people jobs. If you multiply it with 10, it's 7 million people. This is not a joke. You can't have a country with solar panels and wind, but an unstable country. Who's going to provide the job for 700,000 people? So these are critical questions that we need to ask ourselves, and we need to make sure that we support Eskom in their venture of supplying coal-fired power or renewable power to the whole country.
I think we need to take a step back and look at the region for what it is. I mean, we should be thinking more Southern Africa, not just South Africa. So if you look at Eskom, its stakeholders are in the entire region. So you look at countries like Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique. So in addition to South Africa, there are all these large populations that are reliant on supply from Eskom. So it's in everyone's best interest that the whole system is supported. So the question is, what can we do from the region to also support? And what we do have, say in Botswana, we have very young, low-cost coal fields. And from a logistics perspective, there's actually quite decent rail access into this market as well. And what has really been the challenge before is that the procurement has been difficult, because obviously Eskom has certain empowerment requirements, and there's a cross-border element. But if we take that away, I mean, we've done our studies and we've done our numbers, and the coal at these prices and in the last 5 years, say, is actually very competitive. So I think there's an opportunity to get into long-term contracts, and what it does, it means that instead of worrying about competing with exports, let the exports happen and focus on imports from other countries so that both markets can thrive. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is an opportunity from the region, is that there's an opportunity to diversify the power supply for the whole region. So not just relying on Eskom, but to say, you know what, let's have alternative supplies. There have been programs. As you know, there was an IPP process started by the DOE for coal power stations. But I think, unfortunately, particularly in this country, a number of the banks have elected not to fund coal-powered fire stations for various reasons. But that is not necessarily the case in neighboring countries. So I think a look at saying, you know, Eskom has done the heavy lifting for so long. Isn't it about time that other countries start contributing in order to make sure that there is security of supply? Because I think that's why everyone is concerned with Eskom. It's security of supply, not just for South Africa, but for the entire region. And so my view is that we need to take a step back. And the opportunities is that, you know, I'd say there have been a couple of South African companies that have come to Botswana the last couple of years. One of them is actually opening a mine now as we speak. But what I'm saying is that there are billions and billions of tons of coal in Botswana. We're currently moving coal from Botswana to South Africa, highly competitive, beating the local players on a power basis. So that's where the opportunities lie, in both the coal and in the power.
Yeah, I will not talk about, you know, like a price specifically, because I mean, you've got competing companies in there. I think in terms of competition law, you know, it will be seen as collusion. I'll talk about the principles. Firstly, our principle is to contract coal on long term, you know, like run a long-term business. Our assets have, you know, timelines of between 40 and 50 years, you know, depending on, you know, like efficiency and how you're maintaining them. So entering into short-term contract is not our default preference, it's how the market responds. And because we also have a developmental mandate, you can't, when somebody comes and says, I've got only coal, you know, like for 2-3 years, you take that, it forms part of you filling up the job. Our preferred pricing principle is efficient cost of mining and a fair return, you know, like for people investing in the mines. We don't, you know, like want to link up with the export pricing. So Eskom cannot afford, you know, like the parity price. I mean, you do that, I think Vuslat touched a bit, although from a different slant, you know, like when you do that, you basically are making electricity unaffordable, you know, and coal is not the only input in our cost makeup, but it's quite significant on our primary energy, you know, like a makeup. So we prefer, you know, bespoke contracts, hedged, you know, like that is hedged against volatility in the market. We are a regulated industry. So our price of what we're supposed to pay for coal is actually regulated, but we play in an unregulated market. So these two things, you know, create a dichotomy that, you know, like the regulator sometimes, you know, like have to deal with. We have to deal into now. So pricing coal on export parity, you know, like for people that are using the market to speculate, and when the price is right, when your, you know, like top grade coal is 100 rands, you know, like 100, you know, like US dollars, you know, like per ton, and people want to use that as a pricing, you know, like that's what creates a problem. We don't go into that. So I've already touched on, you know, like on the pricing principle. What is changing is the landed cost of coal. You know, we come from a from a period about 20 years ago where 100% of our coal was on conveyor. Now we have, like easily between 40 and 45 million tons of coal that is on road or rail. You have now additional transport component. We've shut down the colliery at Majuba in the 90s because of, mining conditions. And Majuba, consumes about 16 million tons per annum. And you can imagine the transport component, like if you're moving the coal 200 kilometers away because Majuba sits slightly outside, like in the main Ohis and Witbank coal fields. So that is the one part. I just want to maybe, just for the sake of, completeness, say, from an ESCOM perspective, we believe in the mixed, like a energy, a profile.
Yeah.
I think dependency on one technology is also, not ideal. However, we need to exploit what is available, to us and exploit it responsibly and so on. I'm also keen to listen to what, Professor Rosemary is going to say. We have, a clean coal technology, research, which we think it is deployable, but it is exploiting the coal resource in a different way. I mean, it's a famous Majuba underground coal gasification. It is unaffordable to us to do alone. So, I mean, there's opportunity for partnership to advance that. And if you look at IRP says, by 2030, our contribution from coal will probably reduce to about 45% of the total energy mix because you've got gas and, renewables that are coming, on board. So the renewables are here to stay, they're not going anywhere, it's part of technology that primary energy source, sun, wind is available, to us, we have to exploit it. I think it has to be a balancing act. There are technical issues in terms of how you run the grid as well. You have to balance that. I think we should look at an energy mix, from a holistic, perspective. We need to look at how we improve reducing our energy footprint as a coal sector that is now from pit to boiler. We have to look at that part. It can't only be carbon. It has to be with everything, that we do. And so the opportunity, I think, is there, and let me not look backward and give you a forward-looking picture. We have about 13 coal-fired power stations. All of them have different, useful life, and I think the last units will end up, around 2050 or so. So from that portfolio of, power stations, there is a certain amount of coal that we've already contracted, through long-term contracts, medium and short-term. However, we have a shortfall, to meet the energy demand as per the IRP of about 1.3 billion tons. Okay, and that 1.3 billion tons, 470 of it has to happen between now and 2030, and the balance is between 2030 and 2050. One of the biggest contributors is Kusile. I think it's common knowledge that we built Kusile before we could, put pen on paper on a long-term agreement. There was an intention that, you'll abstract the coal from an adjacent, coal resource, the New Lago coal resource. So the opportunity is there. I think we've been to the market on Arnott, to source the balance of coal we require, until end of life. And this is basically the principle I spoke about earlier. Our intent is not to participate in the coal procurement, coal purchasing. Our intention is to hedge ourselves into long-term contracts and just manage the logistics. That creates a base for the coal industry. Then the balance of trade can go and become seaborne. The two markets can exist symbiotically. It has happened, and I think there is opportunity. If you look at what's in the ground, there is opportunity. So from an ESCOM perspective, there is quite a lot of opportunity. We'll be hitting the market quite soon, for about 8 power stations, Majuba, Kusile, Kriel, various grades. Our grade profile, is between 4.2 kilocal to about 5.5 kilocal. That's a space we play in, and you can see that the export market and the domestic market used to be, totally separate. And I think over the past 8 to 10 years, there's an overlap. So we are competing now for the same coal with the exporters, and that's why you see tendency for people of short-term focus, as Vuslat said, want to look at. We look at it from a long-term perspective.
Yeah.
So if you are in it, for the long haul, it's good for the investors. Your institutional investors would like to see, that kind of a profile, and it's good for us. It's good for price of electricity predictability as well. You look at, you saw the contribution in terms of coal relative to all other commodities. But if you go to the trade balance, and go and look at what export is bringing, to the table. If I'm the Minister of Finance, I'll be, very wary of somebody saying, stop coal exports in favor of Eskom. Then what do you do, with the trade balance? So I think it has to be something that we look at it from a total value chain. Yeah.